Today on the Work Sucks But I Like It podcast, we're tackling a question that seems simple but runs deeper than you might think. Does your job title actually matter? Is it just a label on a business card or a header on your LinkedIn profile? Or does it shape how others see you, the authority you hold, and even how you see yourself? Spoiler alert, the answer is both yes and no. Let's unpack why. Let's consider when someone asks, "What do you do?" which basically is asking, "What have you done with your life to this date?" And typically, the job title you were given is how you respond. The question implies, what do you do during the day that makes you money? First of all, I hate this question. What do you do is about as useful as what do you do when you take out the trash, or what do you do when you have to buy groceries? What do you do is beyond what you do to make money. Because if I were to label you as simply a construction worker or a cook or whatever, it fails to show what else you do. The world isn't filled with just trading time for money. Another way to see this is if I ask you what your favorite color is. You might say blue, just like how you answer the question of what do you do with your job title. So sure, maybe you can be summarized by the color blue being your favorite color, but why blue? Blue what? Do you like blue shoes, a blue car, a blue sky on a day at the beach? Or maybe you just feel blue today, or like the Blues Clues show growing up. Because maybe you do identify with your job title of construction worker, buyer, or engineer. But maybe you're a painter, a hiker, you have a family, you're not just blue, you're the name your parents gave you at birth. Your answer of what you do for work is beyond just the thing you do to trade time for money. There is more to your life beyond just being a potential blue-collar worker, because as we talked about in a previous episode on the show, work isn't just defined as the cultural construct of trading time for money, but instead, when defining work from the physics perspective of a force multiplied by the displacement of an object. This implies that there is work we must do when we get up in the morning, work we do to motivate ourselves to take a shower, work we do to run a marathon, work we do to go shopping, and so on, fighting the force of gravity as we displace our hands and feet in the space-time of what we call living and working today. So what you do should not just be your job title. What you do is more about the purpose of what you are doing in your lifetime. And if I were to guess for most of you, work, this thing we do to trade time for money, is a big part of your life. That is because it is a big part, and that is how and why you answer this question the way you do, with your job title. But even if you consider work as an 8-hour day, there are the other 16 hours of the day that you still do things. Maybe it's sleep, but what are the other 8 hours? And unfortunately, even the 8-hour day is often more when you factor in the time to commute and even a lunch break. So this is the work-life equation of today. Unfortunately, though, I don't have an answer to this question of what do you do. And I'd love to hear your answer in a comment on social, or maybe we can make an episode on the show to sort through how to answer this question of what do you do. But back to job titles for now with this episode. My brother said it to me well when you are introducing yourself to someone, that you're just throwing your alphabet soup at them with your degrees and titles and whatnot, that it's just part of the social norms of today. It's like a formalized way of greeting someone, almost like an icebreaker. It just gets the conversation going. So this job title can be seen to serve as one of two things. One being your form of identity, you associating with the fact you are an engineer, a buyer, a teacher, a person who works at a college or in the medical industry, or just a communication shortcut to starting the conversation with the person in front of you. An attempt to establish something in common early on. Now let's consider whether a job title gives you more credibility when working across departments or with clients. And where I want to take today's show is in what the job title actually allows us to do in the work we do that trades time for money. Because I've had job titles where I thought I could get things done, but wasn't high enough, as they say, to make the executive decisions. But over the years, I've still been able to find ways to get things done by using some different strategies when my job title didn't allow me, at least on paper that is. So let's dive into what a job title really represents. First off, what is a job title? Let's turn to Taylorism, and no, not Taylor Swift. Taylorism is the idea that work can be broken down into tasks such that there's an efficient way to perform a process. I utilize this concept all the time as a process engineer and quality manager. In the aerospace industry, we use what is called a process flow diagram. Essentially, it is the basic steps of a process. Step 1 may be receive an order. Step 2, process order to meet the requirements. Step 3, make procedures for manufacturing the part. Step 4, make part, and so on. So from this idea of Taylorism, you can see that we can assign this responsibility of builder or buyer or receiver or quality to someone. From the way a process works, we can assign these specific job titles for each single task we need the employee to perform. Often, though, we only think of applying Taylorism to just the tasks of what gets done on the floor. That is, the people who actually make the parts, at least in the world of manufacturing, not the ones that necessarily sit in the office. But it gets a little more unclear as we step higher up the organizational chart and applying Taylorism. Because the way I look at organizational charts is not like the meme of the birds all sitting perched on the tree. You might have seen it on Google, take a peek. And the ones looking up see assholes, while the birds above see shitheads. Meaning that the birds above just give the people below shit, and hence the label, and you get it. Instead, I view organizational charts as the players that are responsible for making the best decision and not necessarily just assigning key tasks to have an efficient process. Let's consider an operator manufacturing a part. They need to decide at their level whether the part can be processed or not. Will it be good or bad, and so on. Then we get to the supervisor level. They need to be aware of what the employee is doing, of course, that reports to them, but then be able to decide whether it needs to run to meet the daily demand or not, the part that they're trying to schedule, maybe the equipment. They need to also decide whether to stop production and get quality or maintenance, depending on the issue going on or even the engineer, when things aren't going according to the schedule. Let's turn to the manager. They oversee the supervisors. And if it's set up right, the supervisors are strategically placed in the organization to be the sort of eyes of the operation for the managers. From that perspective, they aren't shitheads, nor are the managers assholes. The manager has to now make the decisions of getting the sales team involved, or IT, or maybe even human resources at times. And there might be a director of operations where they themselves oversee all the managers, and it goes from there. Where at the top, the captain, as I like to view them, they are steering the company safely through the market, but boldly enough to capture the sales and being a competitor today in the market. Not like pirates, of course, doing things ethically and professionally. So a job title is critical to the relative decisions you need to make doing a job. But this shouldn't always be the excuse for why something cannot get done in the workplace. With an understanding of more or less how organizations are set up, the organizational chart is really lanes of communication. It isn't a hierarchy of who is better or smarter. It's about effectively communicating when key decisions need to be made. So in the literal sense of this perspective, a job title does matter, as it is expected and built into the process of how decisions will be made. But I think this is a trap, because what ends up happening is this. It becomes this attitude of those, what I will call lower in the organization, that don't want to make any decisions. They feel that it isn't their job, which in some sense it isn't. But the entire organization is a team. Decisions must be made at all levels of the organization to help this team move forward, as one decision impacts the person above, below, and alongside them. Which brings up the question of the work lining up with your actual job title. Now, in the case of manufacturing, it sometimes is a little clear on the floor as to the responsibilities. If there is someone in shipping that is sending the customer the products, they would likely not have the responsibility of doing the grinding and final inspection on the product. This, of course, assumes large organizations that require teams to get products out the door. It's like having a quarterback, linebacker, and wide receiver in a game. One person alone can't do all the tasks on the football field to successfully win. So if we go back to the idea of Taylorism, and if the team has set up the complex process and broken it into pieces of the process that are going to be most effective within each step, then the job title should be clear and imply the necessary responsibilities. Imagine I have a part. I have to receive the order for the part, likely from the sales team. Then they set up the process, likely from the process engineer. Then schedule the part into the production, likely from the planner. Then process the part, likely by the operations manager and operations team. Then check the part by the quality team. Then ship the part by the shipper. In this simplified example, it's clear as to what a job title implies. It is the critical operation for the given step that transforms the part to the final product. But sometimes the work we do isn't always in the job description. And sometimes in the contractor view, questions of can the company run this particular part must be asked. So there now has to be some coordination with the process engineer and production team, basically getting the team involved. Sometimes the operation team needs to even coordinate with maintenance and facilities to make sure everything is set up and ready to go. As you can see, there are multiple decisions that need to be made to get back to the simplified flow of product. I think of this more like an art at this point. It's part science, as you can deduce the process into small components to build it back up. But the art is really in how you manage responsibility with the people. Because imagine it like this. Would you rather have the right title with unclear responsibilities or the right responsibilities without the title? In the case of having the right title with unclear responsibilities, it's like having a title but you aren't sure what you're supposed to be doing. I've seen this before with middle managers in an organization. A company stacks an area manager, then a general manager, then a director of operations, and the responsibilities as to who is doing what begins to really get blurry. But having the right responsibilities without the title can also impact you. I have seen engineers who have the responsibility of designing the process not have the power to implement the process as they didn't have the title per se. So, in the end, I do think it's important for a little bit of both because it's going to depend on the audience you're talking to. For someone looking to make change, all the textbooks in psychology are going to tell you that decisions are made from the bottom up, but the top also must support it down. For someone trying to make change, it's also important that regardless of their title, they should be trying their best to educate and sell the idea of why this should be done the way they're proposing. In a way, a job title indicates your progression of decision making and communication skills. It's not necessary for everyone to climb the corporate ladder or start their own business. I've learned so much from the interviews on this podcast show talking with people about their work and their businesses if they own one. But in terms of the corporate ladder, the higher you climb in the organization, the more important it is to be able to talk to those higher than you, not just those below you. You know the dialogue at the factory floor setting already, as that is where you likely came from. But it's at the higher levels, like in the meetings and water cooler talks with other leaders in the company, that are now the important skill to develop. You don't need a job title to talk to the president of a company. But regardless of job title, the one important thing to recognize in the work and the responsibilities you have is your confidence. I have seen too many people hide behind their job titles because they're afraid to make decisions. It's the classic throw a tantrum or create a scene to have people look elsewhere instead of their relative inability to do something or get something done. It's all too easy to say you're the manager and what is final in decisions you make. And there's a degree to using the title to make important decisions and backing those up with the title. I think of it in terms of differentiating between confidence and arrogance. Confidence is important in that it is not arrogance. Confidence is that degree to which you know what you are doing and why you are doing it. This confidence should be portrayed in how you do your work, not in how you rattle off your job title. That is arrogance. For me, at the end of the day, though, the job title doesn't really matter other than it gives me a baseline sort of implied by Taylorism for the basic functions I need to get done each day. Aside from that, I place the other tasks in my day around that. For example, when I was strictly a process engineer, I knew that I needed to create and maintain the instructions for the electric arc furnace that melted steel and made billets and blooms to be shipped to the customer. That was my responsibility years ago. I grew to be confident in mastering the basic steps required to do this. But my job wasn't just that. It extended to working with quality and maintenance. It required learning how the furnace worked and how to properly staff it within a union setting. What tends to happen is that people who act arrogantly with their job title, they forget the actual responsibilities they're supposed to be doing. It goes back to Peter's principle that I talk about in my second book, Don't Let Life Pass You By, Win the Game of Work and Play, in that people will rise to the level of their incompetence. Sometimes what happens in corporate is that an engineer, say, gets hired and they do a great job. The team is confident in the ability for this engineer to get the work done and has been successful at doing so. They then project the success on another position in the company, and now the same person gets promoted to be a manager. However, the skills of being successful as an engineer aren't necessarily the same skills needed to be as successful as a manager. And instead of stepping back and keeping an open mind about learning something new, well, some people hide behind their job title afraid to step down from the mountain they think they've climbed. Today, job titles are becoming less important in today's workplace, at least for me when I see people in their resumes now, because I want to build a winning team, not just jumble some words around and make things look good on paper as I talk about in a previous episode about interviewing and hiring the right candidate. But one of the problems happening today is that people are equating titles and likes and followers to success. It's not about how many people report to you or what vice president of something you are. It's about the manner in which you perform your work. That is your responsibility. There are so many new job titles I have seen been created and even eliminated over the years as well, which just really shows the responsibilities have been changing and people are literally making this up. Responsibility is not just assigned to you from the place you're employed, though. but also from the realization of what you see needs to get done. That sort of responsibility defines leadership and can be found at any level of the organization. Which makes me wonder about what sort of job title I would want that encapsulates this. I think philosophical engineer, to be honest. It was actually my first website I built years ago, and it houses all my experiences and reflections in life. Because I see every day as optimizing the nature of reality through the simple cycle of experience something in the day and reflecting on it later. It doesn't have to be all heady with citing the great philosophers, but a simple question of how to live each day. When you see your job title like that, it won't matter what the type of work is that comes your way. It won't matter that you're a process engineer, a cook, a teacher, or a landscaper. Instead, it's about realizing the bigger picture of your life and the work you were sent to do here, and recognizing that as a responsibility. Adam Ondra is one of the greatest rock climbers of today. You could say his job title is a professional rock climber. But it was in an interview from a friend of his that I enjoyed listening to when he was talking about Adam on some YouTube video. It was about how this friend was indicating that it was Adam's responsibility to be the best rock climber and to utilize his talents and build his skills to push the boundary of human strength. In a way, rock climbing defines Adam, like how we define our own work and our own lives. But the difference with an athlete is that they see everything they do as funneling towards the one thing they want to work on. Whereas the problem with work is that we often compartmentalize it as, oh, that's the thing that makes me money. I have my life outside of there. Adam would never go, I am only a rock climber when I'm rock climbing. Instead, his entire life is directed towards being the best rock climber. And that might show up in how he manages relationships with friends and family, how he climbs, if you will, to reach those particular goals, how he even eats and in cross trains. Imagine if we could build into the workers of today, who aren't necessarily sports athletes, this essence of building their life and giving 100% of themselves to the work they do. This is where it can get a little religious, I guess, for some, in that we believe there's a higher power or purpose or calling. I will share, though, how I view my day and the work that I do being a philosophical engineer. It can be summarized by the tattoos in my body, and some of you have already seen these from me rock climbing and being at yoga and whatnot. There are two on my arms and one around my leg. And they're in Latin and were inspired by my favorite high school teacher who taught me Latin for 3 years. And they read as follows: Fortes soli superstitis sunt, porendum venitis eudaimonia. And what that translates to roughly is only the strongest survive, seek and discover a good life. And strength and survival doesn't mean just a Darwinian sense, but strength mentally, physically, emotionally, and even spiritually. Seek and discover a good life. Because that is the work I really believe people are doing today. They are seeking with their talents and strengths today of how to survive and to lead a good life. So, how do you focus on how to start steering from just the label of the job title and getting people to realize their responsibility and strengths to seek out a good way to live? In a corporate setting, it starts with empowering those lower in the organization. And right away, this implies placing emphasis on those that have a job title. It is upon upper management to foster the culture in such a way as to share responsibility and keep everyone engaged regardless of their job title, though. So forget the job title for a moment. Basically, what needs to be realized for those higher up in the organization is the higher the level of responsibility is to get the higher levels of engagement with the team. If I were to define a true leader, to me, they are the ones that want results, not necessarily the credit that goes with it. They get the job done and aren't attached to the accolades that come with it. And if they get an award, they're humble and professional about it. Recently, I've been working through a scenario with someone with a particular job title and not really fully utilizing their title. They have the title, but are not sure what to do with it. In this occasion, as we were working through this particular instance with this employee having the title of supervisor, it became apparent that he wasn't really sure what responsibility that implied. Unfortunately, today, work is sometimes viewed as looking frantic throughout the day and making it seem like a lot of stuff is getting done. Run around and don't take breaks and work long hours and pick up the work others aren't willing to do. Put it all on yourself. There's this idea that appearance of working like that is actually working. And that couldn't be farthest from the truth, because that is a recipe for burnout and ultimately the failure for the process. It's not about how you look when you work. It's the measure of what actually is getting done. So what we did was this with this particular person. First, we listened to what this particular employee was saying. What were his biggest complaints? Now, this actually took time as this employee was putting up all sorts of walls and did not, want to invite change in or different ideas or types of questions. And claiming at times there wasn't enough time in the day to get things done if we had to do another meeting. And I agree, meetings can be a waste of time, but sometimes we do need a meeting. It's like a quick huddle before the ball is snapped in a football game. If you don't meet, then you have no idea what play call is going to happen next. So in this meeting, we were trying to understand how he was calling the plays in his department. He was indicating to us that he didn't really want to impose upon other employees this work that needed to be done, even though as a supervisor, the task is to assign those responsibilities to do the work. This employee had in his mind that because he was the supervisor of that department, he needed to do everything. And to be a good example to those who worked around him, he had to be busy the entire shift. Yet this was resulting in poor output of product and wasted labor and resources. But this, employee wasn't intentionally doing this. Instead, they thought they were actually doing the right thing, trying to be a good example. Imagine though the quarterback snapping the football to himself and then blocking the opposing team and then running wide for a pass that he needs to throw for himself. In sports, it's clear why you need a team. In sports, it's clear how responsibility is given to each player on that team. You're the quarterback, your job title is the wide receiver, and so on. So we realized right away we needed to relieve some of the tasks with the supervisor because right now he was doing everything, throwing the ball, catching the ball, and also trying to block the other team. So when people are overwhelmed by work, it can come out in various ways. They might be silent and conceal their frustrations, while others might visibly show their anger towards the matter, others running around like chickens with their heads cut off. There was a lot of frustration in asking this department to increase their capacity, but the good news was this. We showed him one day that he could do it, hit the number, we needed to be profitable and keep customers happy. I think of creating responsibility today as empowering those to make change or sometimes needing to show that things can be done. Either approach is valid, and the supervisor was able to see that it could be done if he let his team around him work together. The most important thing that makes this successful is the training that goes into the industrial athletes running this process. Just like in sports where football teams train for the game and practice their plays and do their drills, industrial athletes are no different. They practice every day, and unfortunately for them, it's always game time to perform every day they show up to work. So just like how a wide receiver can sometimes make a block and not catch the football to help the team, an employee can also adjust their responsibility to help the team out so they're successful at making the play. Often, though, I see the use of such power the other way, that people with titles don't make any concerted effort towards the main goal. They just point their finger and direct people while sitting in the comfort of their office. That goes back to the point of distinguishing between confidence and arrogance. There's something deeper to this person's story of why they need to hide behind a title and sometimes in their office. And wrapping up this episode today, I want to end with something from one of my favorite books of all time. I've studied and read this book for nearly 18 years to help me in my relations with people. And it's the book How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie. And it basically indicates that people want a feeling of importance every day. It can come in various forms. It can range from unfortunate acts of violence as someone wants to get on TV and the news, which is ridiculous, or it can come in the form of small gifts and acts of appreciation to those closest to you. We all want to seek and achieve these things that make us happy, and this happiness leading to doing good in the world. But the strength to do this lies in a clear understanding of what is your responsibility. What is your responsibility when you have a job title? What is your responsibility when you don't? To make people feel important on the job is to give them the responsibility of being a part of the team, giving them a clear direction as to who are the wide receivers, for example, but still practice blocking when sometimes you need that person. When the wide receiver is sick, they call out. And in some instances, right, you can't do that, it's the case in football. But in the corporate setting, you can cross-train. So empowering people to want to show up and play the game of work is really what we're saying here. I talk about this in my book, Don't Let Life Pass You By, Win the Game of Work and Play, and getting people to recognize that work can be turned into play. So let's wrap this up. So does your job title matter? In some ways, yes. It can open doors, give credibility, and help others understand your role. But in other ways, no, because your real influence comes from the work you do, the relationships you build, and the results you deliver with the team around you. Titles may help, but they don't define your worth. So remember, success is not about good luck, it's about good skills. The skill today is to recognize that it's not just what they call you, it's what you do that counts. So thanks for tuning in to the Work Sucks But I Like It podcast. Hit that subscribe button for more content coming your way, and we'll see you next time. Thank you.
And there's a wind that blows